Hi, everybody, and welcome to Brief Encounters. My name is Federico Varias, and I'm a program attorney at the DC Bar, and I'm excited to welcome you again and to welcome our guest today, Michael DJ Eisenberg from the Tech Savvy Lawyer. And he is also a podcaster, so it's great to have him here. Welcome, Michael. How are you?
I'm great, Federico. Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
It's great to have you here, and just because after 2 years of pandemic life, we're all living off our computers, and it's something we've been thinking about. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And you were mentioning something to me just as we joined this call about, for some people, actually thinking about computers is very basic.
I think you're referring to an editorial I read in the ABA about how this one author / humorist was commenting about how people are constantly informed of how to do some of the simplest things on a computer. Now, when I say simple, that may be simple to me because, to be blunt, I've been using a computer for 40 years. I have a master's degree in civil engineering. I know how to use computers. The thing is, a lot of attorneys, when they went to law school to learn the law. In the same sense, they don't know how to do accounting, say for their trust accounts. They also don't necessarily know how to run a computer. Sure, they may be able to type on it. Sure, they can use Word, maybe send an email, have a little fun on Facebook, even do legal research in Lexis. But to understand some of the internal workings, and this, when I say internal, I don't mean just the hardware, I mean the software. Attorneys don't know some of the basic functions, like having a VPN, a virtual private network, when you're surfing the internet at Starbucks. Because guess what? If you've got client personal private information on your computer and you're transmitting that over public Wi-Fi, individuals can try to see that and take that information and use it for something nefarious. And that's just, one example of many things I'm seeing people not doing with their computers. They're not backing them up. They're not securing them with a password. And as we are moving to a virtual environment, working from home, these are things that more and more attorneys need to become aware of, because they're not going to be going to their brick and mortar office where they're going to have the natural securities that's already built in for them by their tech personnel. They have to do this themselves now, and they need to be aware of this. Now, I happen to be a solo practitioner, and for the last, I've been doing this for the last 15 years. So obviously I needed to be aware of this and take care of this just like anyone else should. But I also had the advantage of, 25 years of experience of computer knowledge. And over the years, when I first started out, I was giving away, if you will, so much tech advice to colleagues and friends and whatnot about, do you know that you can put a second monitor on your computer? I think everyone does that naturally now, but 15 years ago, 10 years ago, people didn't know to instinctively do this. And, my wife was getting a little bit irritated with me because I'd spend an hour on the phone helping this person or this with their computer issues. And that kind of led me into starting a blog, the techsavvylawyer.page, and, where we talk about using your computer and doing some of the things above and beyond the simple things to help you enhance your practice. And that kind of spurned off with the podcast, where I'm interviewing a lot of lawyers, judges, and others in the legal profession about how they use computers in law and in their law practice. And it's interesting how everyone has their unique perspective. And I find myself learning something new every time.
So what's the most interesting thing you've learned? Like something that really surprised you that you did not expect people were doing, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think a bad thing, and I'm going to be posting about this either the day of this recording or the next day, is that you've got to watch your settings when you say things. In other words, if you're in public, you're not going to just start talking about a client's case with details of the name, social security number, oh my God, the client did it. If you will, that is a pre-hot mic moment. And of course, now we're seeing hot mic moments where
They definitely are.
President Biden got caught on a hot mic moment of calling a journalist, stupid, but it got caught. And, to his credit, he called and apologized. I think last week, a judge got caught in a hot mic moment when he referred to a female attorney who had just finished her arguments, and he thought that the conference was over, and said, "Can you imagine having to, sleep next to her," or something to that effect? You know, he wasn't careful to make sure his mic was turned off. And this is happening whether it be in person, whether it be on a conference call, whether it be on a conference video. I mean, it's just amazing how people forget to make sure that nobody can hear that they're going to say and or do on camera. And this is just happening more often than not. And this is something simple. So, for instance, if you're doing a video hearing, do you bother to look what's behind you? Some people have had some of the worst and perhaps incriminating backgrounds. I mean, this is not necessarily a tech issue, it's a common sense issue. Again, hanging up the phone, turning off the mic, looking what's behind you. There was that case where the judge realized that in a domestic violence issue, the spouse who was on a no contact order was in the same room or in the same house as the wife when he was supposed to be at least 500 yards away. And the judge realized that the wife was being coerced because the spouse was dumb enough to actually be appearing in video, literally in the same house. I think it was the same room. These are common sense things that people need to think about when they're on computers. It's like when you got to reread an email before you send it, because if you send it, you said something stupid, you can't get it back. You appear on video and say something stupid or do something stupid, you can't get that back. It's going to get out there.
That is true. Earlier today, you talked about, like, just when we started the conversation, you mentioned VPN. Let's think about the very basics, because I think
Sure.
sometimes we forget about those things. So, like, you need a VPN. Do people still need antivirus software or like things like that, or not?
If you're using a Windows device, you absolutely need some antivirus on there. There's no doubt in my mind. Just the way Microsoft and Windows was built, it is just too easy to get a virus on your computer. It's too easy for scammers and spoofers to get into your computer and take your data or lock you out and send you a ransomware. Now, it's a little bit harder on a Mac. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's just a lot harder. I do have an antivirus on there, but that's probably me being a little bit paranoid. Then that's the Mac for my office. Now, I have a Windows device I use for the blog, just to sort of keep me honest, if you will, that I'm in both operating systems. But even though I'm not like quote unquote doing the law on there, I absolutely have an antivirus on there. But I do want to go one step back with regards to the VPN, if I may. If you're in an isolated house, on a street, you probably don't need a VPN when you're on the internet. That being said, if you live in an apartment complex or have a lot of Wi-Fi signals in your list, that means that you have others nearby, you probably need to have a VPN. If you're in a Starbucks or in a hotel, somewhere public, you absolutely need a VPN. The only time you may not need a VPN is, quite frankly, is if you're getting your internet through your phone cell company. So whether it's Verizon or AT&T or the T-Mobile, a couple others, you probably do not need a VPN to be running in the background. Sort of like the advantage of like just bringing your own hotspot. I mean, you can do that so easily with an iPhone or an Android device. And if you have a good data plan, pretty much if you go to Starbucks, you could just tap into your phone without any issue, without worrying about other prying eyes.
So the risk is the Wi-Fi.
Correct.
Not yeah.
Correct. But it's
not
also
necessarily.
easy to go to Starbucks and just tap into their Wi-Fi, or even when you're at the court, most courts now have Wi-Fi, which is not a problem to use, except make sure you have your VPN running. I think one of the biggest problems that attorneys will probably see is when they're on airplanes, it's really hard to get the VPN to work on there. And so you're going to be at risk if you just use their Wi-Fi without some sort of VPN.
So your recommendation there would be to download what you're going to work on before you jump on that plane?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's probably the smarter thing to do because most of us have some sort of ongoing backup process or sync process working in the background. For instance, like Dropbox is syncing up our files. And if we make a change on our computer, that's going to be transferred automatically back to the server, the Dropbox server, then hopefully to your computer back at your office. That being said, also, you can limit the certain programs like I think Trip Mode that will allow you to basically not have certain programs running in the background so that maybe you just have your email, or if you wanted to have a chat, like Slack working at the time, but everything else is not connected. That may help secure you some, but it's not perfect.
Why would that help you?
Well, because the data and the information is not being transferred. So
Okay.
if I'm not sending a bank account information, on a PDF that I have stored in my office, that's not being transferred. So I don't have to worry about that being looked at by prying eyes.
Okay, I see what you mean. Every time it's getting like refreshed, the saving into
Right.
like
Right.
Dropbox or OneDrive. Yeah.
Exactly. Or if like you're working on your computer on the plane and you move it from one file to the other, that's going to refresh if you've got that option going.
So one question I have about VPN, and this is a
Mhm.
genuine question, is
Please.
VPN back in the day, my security team in another job would said like, hey, here's a free VPN service online. I'd get it. And I don't know where it connected, but I assume it was Germany
Well,
because the language that came out on the browser was German, like the default. And I thought it was funny whenever I connected to it.
I think I can answer that in two ways. Okay. The first one is number one, you said it was a free VPN.
Yes.
Yeah. I would not use a free VPN because they're not free. Somehow, some way, they're earning money off of you in the same way that Google and Facebook are not free. They are gathering information one way or the other and using that so that they can earn a profit. So you should be paying for your VPN. And obviously, you should try to find a reliable VPN. If you go to someplace like cnet.com, they can provide a list of reliable, trustworthy VPNs. I use one called encrypt.me. That is great because it allows me to have one account for several different devices, both Windows and Mac. The second
Mhm.
answer to your question is you have the ability in most VPNs to determine from what country your server is working through.
Okay.
So if you have it tasked for, say, the fastest, you give up that right of what country it's coming out of. So the VPN that you were talking about may have been set to the fastest and it may just be more predominantly coming from Germany. Now, on the other hand, if you have it set for Germany, well, then all of your traffic is going to be going through Germany, and that may influence how your browser is interpreting language settings. Of course, you should also look at your browser's language settings and make sure that's not somehow being altered.
That makes sense. I always thought that was a funny thing, but it also highlights one issue, and it's that at the time I was working with a shoestring nonprofit, where
Hmm.
paying for VPN was not an option. It was just
Right.
like the best they could do for security measures.
I think that attorneys need to figure out or need to understand really there are certain things that you need to pay for. For instance, you need to pay for a VPN if you're traveling, period. You need to pay for your own domain name. If you're using Gmail, for instance, well, they aren't exactly trustworthy when it comes to prying eyes. So you don't want just to use a regular Gmail account. You need to pay for some sort of web page presence. That is first the shingle, which has become the yellow pages, which has now become web pages. You need to have that sense of quote unquote legitimacy. There are just some fundamental things that you need to find yourself paying for. I know that the DC Bar offers Fastcase, I believe, as a legal
Yeah,
source, research
that's the
source.
one.
But the question is does that provide you enough with regards to like shepherdizing? Does that cover everything that you need? Do you have to pay for something like Westlaw or Lexis, depending on the practice that you have? It's one thing to be starting off, as a say a solo or a small practitioner, but you need to find what minimal things you have to pay for. Again, VPNs, I would have probably a Microsoft Office account because we are stuck with Microsoft Word for right now. Sure, there are programs like Pages and others that may come free with Macs or may come be free online, but you need things to be working smoothly in Word because that's what everyone else does. you need to have some sort of domain name and email provider that is secure and that's yours so that you can have your own identity. I mean, it's the cost of doing business. And when you go cheap on some of this stuff, it's going to show, or worse yet, it's going to get you in trouble with the bar.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, so the two items we talked about, the VPNs and domain names, they're not that expensive.
How much are they usually?
Well, VPNs can be anywhere, say, between 10 to 20 bucks a month at most. I think plans are between $6 and $10 now. Getting a domain name, go to like hover.com, HOVER.com. You can register your own domain name there. You can get a domain name for like under $100 per year. And usually with that, you get some sort of email account with storage space that's going to be more than enough for, small practitioners and solo attorneys. If you're a large firm, you should obviously have a tech guy or two on staff helping you with all these technology issues.
But for a solo practitioner, you can run it on your own.
You could probably run it on your own, or, to be blunt, reach out to people like me for advice and consult. This is my other job, if you will, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. I really like playing with computers and helping others solve their tech problems.
And I can tell that. This has been a great conversation, actually. I think we should have you here more often. But before I let you go, I want to ask you one last thing. We were having some issues with Zoom when we started. And so what are your musts for Zoom? What are the things people should know not to do and that are okay to do?
Okay, so I like to give my answers in threes. Anyone who listens to my podcasts, it's usually an answer of three. So number one, you need to have headphones. Whether they're a wired headphone or they're Bluetooth, it is important that you have them so you don't get the voice echoing and reverberation. Two, you have to have a separate mic, a microphone. I say this because, to be blunt, the computer mics aren't great. It's easy enough to get something like a Blue Yeti, which is popular amongst podcasters and also attorneys who are, want to have a better mic. They're like $100. They're plug and play. And, we're recording this on my Blue Yeti right now. And I think you and Jess mentioned that, my sound was coming out great, which I'm happy to hear. And then the third thing is you should probably get a 4K camera. Now, the problem with a 4K camera is it's going to take up a lot of bandwidth. So you might want to also have a separate 1081 camera just to make sure that one, you're not using up too much bandwidth, and two, that you have a decent picture. Now, most laptops and standalone computers have cameras built in. They are usually now 1081s, or they're becoming to be 1081s, but they're not always the best cams still. So you're going to have a better presentation because you're going to look better. And that's really important. There are two things I want to add to this overall answer. Number one, your internet is valuable, your internet speed. So if you have the ability to get, say, a 1 gig up and a 1 gig down, you're going to swim. You're going to have plenty, and I mean plenty of bandwidth. And now that, a lot of us are working from home, we have families, we have, spouses who are working, kids who are online for school, that bandwidth will get eaten up. So if you're at home with just like 10 megabytes up, 10 megabytes down, you do not have enough bandwidth, because that helps prevent the choppiness that you sometimes get in conversations and signals. And you just don't want that to happen when you're in the middle of court. The other friendly suggestion I'm going to suggest, and this is going to come out in my blog as I did a hardware review on this, is something called PlexiCam. It's this neat little device that hooks on your monitor or your laptop screen that allows you to position your webcam more in the middle of your screen or in a better place so that you can have the video of who you're talking to just above the webcam. So it looks like you're talking to that person and not staring up at a webcam that's like built into your laptop or hanging on top of your monitor. And it really helps with the overall presentation. Currently, they're not sponsoring the blog or anything, but I have one for my iMac and I love it. And I'm probably going to get one for my laptop too. My work laptop is an Apple Mac Pro with an M1 Max chip in it. And it has a great webcam, but it's also at the top of the monitor and doesn't always give me the ability to look at the person who I'm talking to with the same direct line of sight. That's my extra tip of the day.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Thank you, Michael. And yeah, we were joined today by Michael DJ Eisenberg from the TechSavvyLawyer.page and podcast as well. So check them out and read his blog in the next few days. Thank you so much for making the time to be with us today, Michael.
Thank you, Federico. And please, I'd love to come back.
Absolutely. We'll make sure to have you.